Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and we're very excited to have one of our favorite guests on. They're all favorites, of course, but Rick Ferris out of New England, out of Providence area, Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island, actually, where the beautiful water is, and he's got a beautiful boat. And good friend of ours, good friend of Kathy and Dan's. Dan was a C12 member, in Rick's group. How long ago was that, Rick?
Got to be 6 years, 7 years.
Yeah, so he started with you guys in your group in 2016.
There you go. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is he still in your group or in Paul's group now?
He's in Paul's group now. I miss him dearly.
Yeah. So Rick got some help with somebody to help the little bit northern area, and Rick got the
New England group has exploded.
Yeah.
So he needed some help up there. It's happening up here.
Yeah, and it was kind of fun, a little bit fun to be part of that, since because we met Rick probably 6 or so years ago, and we prayed that God would bless him with growth, meaning more CEOs that he can help disciple. And it really did explode. And you embraced it and said, I think I'll just let God do it. It's a lot better.
Yeah.
We were just talking about technology, because we have to tape these, and we always have interesting difficulty. And Rick, you had a little cute story about technology, and I think everybody who's listening will react to what you say here about technology. We try to do Zoom taping, and there's always interesting things that happen in terms of things that don't work, and then we gotta go back and fix it. And they get interesting enough because, like in the studio, we do the same thing all the time, and often everything is reset, which we don't even understand why, and we gotta fix it all, And so, you had a cute story about that technology as somebody who came to your group.
Yeah, one of our C12 members. We bring all different things to the table in C12. Personal things and business things and challenges. And one of our members is a IT support guy, and he came into a meeting. This is several years ago, and he said, "Hey, I wanted everybody's feedback on my new byline under my logo." And he said, "It's going to be embrace it," meaning embrace IT. And I watched 10 CEOs sit around the table like deer in the headlights, just looking at him with no response. And then finally one of them says, "I don't want to embrace it. I just want it to work. I don't even want to know it exists, like behind some curtain, but I do not want to embrace it." So, by the way, he never went ahead with that byline.
So. That's a new, I'm going to pick that up. I just want it to work.
I just want it to work. I don't want to embrace it. I don't even want to know it's there.
And by the way, here's always for me, it's like, okay, once it's working, why does it stop working?
Makes no sense. Yeah.
It's remarkable, and I think partly is that the technology, remember, technology is driven by programmers and software. I think they make things so complicated that things tend to alter, break, etc., because of not simplicity, so to speak, of what they did. Well, Rick, it's good having you. And first of all, why don't you bring us up to date on your life over the last year or so, of your family, your ministry, you personally. What's been happening over this last year? Just as an overview of bringing everybody up to date.
Well, and maybe even before you launch into that, because we've gained a lot of listeners in the last year since you've been on who may not have heard even who you are. Can you
Okay.
give us just a little blurb who you are and a little bit about C12 New England
That's
for
that's
those who
always
are
good.
new in the game?
That's
Yeah.
always good. Who is that guy? Who is that guy?
Because we know him so well, we assume everybody else does.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of new people listening in the last year or so. So I'd love them to just know a little more about you
Yep.
first.
Yep.
Yeah, wow, that's really great though. How encouraging for the ministry too.
Yep.
So Rick Ferris, I'm married to a beautiful, amazing wife, Kelly, who is definitely, as a friend of mine said, I definitely outpunted my coverage when I married her. We have two amazing boys, John and Michael. 2009, God very supernaturally, and it was an abiding process before ever meeting All for Jesus ministry. It was an abiding process. God called me into being a C12 chair in New England. And at the time, the next chair from me heading south was in Virginia. And so the whole idea, I actually joke
You
with
were
my
in
board.
really new territory.
Oh yeah, I just the past president of C12 used to call me the first seal on the beach. I don't know if he meant because I was overweight or if he meant because I was the first guy going on the beach.
Well, we
Um,
know one thing, Rick, is at least the sharks didn't eat you.
that's right. So, boy, that was just an amazing process. That I joke with my board of advisors. I said, if I ever said to you guys, 14 years ago, hey, I got an idea. I'm going to start a CEO roundtable for just Christian CEOs. We're going to start in Rhode Island, where it's the least populated evangelical population in the country,
Yep.
and they're going to spend a whole day with me, and they're going to pay good money to do it. What do you think of that? It's like, I think my advisors would have just immediately tried to check me back into sanity. I mean, the idea of it really made no sense at all.
Mhm.
Fast forward, and it was actually, I think it's 8 years this coming October that we did our
Mm.
first retreat with you, Rich,
Yep.
and with Dave. But just looking back, and you mentioned about how it's grown in New England, and we've got two other chairs with Paul and Kyle going up in northern part of New England.
Yep.
I remember Kelly and I being in an early C12 conference probably 10, 11 years ago, and it was one of those, well, pray about what is God's vision for your territory, for your region. And I remember
Mm.
Kelly and I praying and then looking at each other and saying, there's going to be 50 CEOs in New England in C12.
Wow.
And I think we're at 42 or
Mm.
41.
That's
That
awesome.
number was outrageous. That was just, C12 used to, joke with me and say, well, we must be going into the convert and sign up mode. It's like we have to save CEOs now in order to build C12 in Rhode Island anyway. So, um, so the ministry, so C12 has gone really strong. Last year, one of my members, Paul Marston, been a member for 6 or 7 years, 8 years, sold his business and came to me, and it had such an impact on his life that he wanted to, go forward as a C12 chair. So C12 is a franchise model. So he purchased the Northern Territory that I had, and has done amazing things with it. I can't think of anybody that would be better. Dan
Mm.
is in his group now, and
Yep.
it's just, yeah, it's so exciting. He's just doing so great, and gave me a little bit of margin, but God is using up that margin as we speak. I'm now trying to, all right, what is next, Lord? What is your will next? It's so we're back on the growth mode even down here in the southern half of
Mm.
New England. So it's really great. Um, Last year was a big year, until you mentioned it just a second ago.
Yep.
Thought about it in passing, but yes, I sold about a third of the practice to Paul, a third as far as revenue is concerned, about half as far as the territory, size is concerned. Did give me some margin. It was timely. We had some challenges last year. 2022 was our oldest son John came down with a really strange illness,
Yeah.
and in late May, early June, and was dangerously sick until November when he had his
Mm.
surgery. I spent 3 days in the hospital with back issues in the late fall, and yeah, it was a challenging year, but I have to say, coming out of it, God just continues to sharpen us through all of those.
Mm,
And I mean, I look at my son's Faith, and his wife's name is Faith, and their kids,
mm,
and I'm just in awe. I mean, their walk with the Lord is just so amazing, and they've learned abiding. To be
mhm.
29 years old as a young couple with two kids, and making decisions with the Lord, and it just gives a dad and a mom and a dad
Don't
a
you
real
love
burden.
seeing that younger generation,
Oh
like, and
gosh,
thinking
yeah,
they're starting out so young, being able to put this into practice, and what a
yeah.
beautiful gift, and just where God can take that, you know?
Yeah, it really is. And so we're off to a great start for 2023. Just going out to Denver for the C12 conference and having 41 people out there for our New England breakfast and stuff like that. Is just
Mhm.
really, as Mike Sharrow at C12 says, we have a disproportionate representation. So
I love it.
yeah, so
Yeah.
so we love that. But yeah, so 2023 is off to a really good start, and everybody's doing great and healthy, and a lot of amazing things going on in C12. So it's been a good start.
Yeah.
We're having a good season.
Yeah. How's Kelly, your wife's? How's her work? I know she had gone through a change at work, and I know she processed through that. How's that going?
It was going much better, but right now it's a little concerning. They've got some more big changes coming from corporate coming down the line that really could mean an awful lot on her. So we're taking that one step at a time, and yeah, she's looking for some help, and,
Yeah.
and trying to get some help and getting some help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Mm.
I have her. Why don't you have her? You guys call me, and we'll process it a little bit as we seek God's will, because I know a lot about what she's been through, and
yeah,
God's guided her each step of the way. He will. So
and
Mhm.
he's so faithful with both of us, and
yeah.
and so much with her. So I appreciate that. One of the things I learned in that is, we have C12 companies, and we try to talk to them a lot about succession and what does God have ahead, and we
Mm.
talk with them all the time about having an internal mindset with their business.
Mhm.
That what is the greater purpose? What is the ministry impact? If God owns the business, what would He have of it? When those businesses get sold into the venture capital world, it goes from eternity to 4 years. It's like
Mm.
it's a complete opposite focus, right? from from the eternal, people minded into the kingdom to flip the numbers in 4 years. It just
Right.
changes everything incredibly. Just really, really changes it. So
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
different mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And when you look at, and this happens to publicly traded companies, happens
Yeah.
to people that are in a now backed by investors, is that they're, they have horizons, and the horizon is I'm going to join this entity, buy this entity. I'm going to do something over the next 4 to 5 years to increase the earnings of that company,
Mhm.
and then I'll sell it to the next group. And the investment community is Kathy is and Dan's actually looking at this now, is they're in different tiers
Mhm.
of where they invest, so that
Right.
somebody that's there's a bunch that will invest in smaller companies. When you make it a little bit bigger, then there's a whole nother
A
group
whole different group.
behind
Yeah.
it, and the group behind it is always willing to pay more because it's now been proven better, and you now
Mhm.
have substance to be able to go further with it. So as the tiers go higher, the multiple of the earnings goes higher, which is a motivation for for them to
Right.
focus on. And the focus, what happens is the focus shifts from the whole company and the people in the company to the numbers of the company.
Mhm.
And if that means getting rid of people or changing people or having less paid people, that's what they do. So,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
typical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick, you
Tough
mentioned
culture change.
culture change. Yeah, very much. So, Rick, you mentioned about your son. You don't need to go into all the detail of it, but why don't you describe your abiding and your walking alongside of him into discerning God's will when there was a problem. He's got a problem. He had a physical problem, and actually also then financial problem. Yeah, and you don't need to go into all the specifics of it, but just how did you and Kelly abide, receive, process wisdom, and help them discern God's will? Because part of what we look at in the way of abiding, connected to the vine, apart from me, you can do nothing. One of the somethings is fruit. And fruit is, in a way, it's really what Jesus spoke, and that is go and make disciples. Teach them to live the life that I've given to you, which is a supernatural life, and it's a abiding life. So we're never to, and this is important, never for us to connect people to us. It's to connect them to the vine, and then let God show them his will and lead them into following him. And by the way, our role is to walk alongside of it and process with God, because we are his messengers into that process. So I know you've done that with your son, and it would, like you said, it was a little bit of a surprise that happened. And so describe a little bit, and then your role, and how did you receive wisdom from God to help him receive wisdom from God?
Yeah, well, as I said, for a young age, they have really experienced abiding and hearing what God has for them, just time after time. Just so even and you guys may recall even the whole thing of them buying their first home, and then having a major conflict over that, and having others step in, our friends Rich and Jana step in and abide with them through that, and how God gave them peace, and then other ones. I mean, for a young couple, they've been through 2 or 3 pretty big experiences of seeing God's hand come in. And so this recent one of last year, he thought he had just some back pain, and they were with us on the boat for a weekend, and he was asking Kelly to help him stretch his back out and whatnot. And it turned out, without going through all the medical stuff of it, it turned out he had an issue, a very serious issue between his colon and his bladder. And so the risk of infection was just really, I mean, they life-threatening. I mean, the infection risk. And so they told him, check your temperature all the time. Your temperature goes up like 1 degree before now in surgery. Just get to the nearest hospital as fast as you can. So that was the way he was living into his, with at the time, a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old.
Wow.
Yeah. And trying to, and oh, by the way, trying to make it as a loan originator in the mortgage industry in a market that was absolutely crashing, and this is his first year. So he had a lot going on, but they had to schedule a surgery with 2 surgeons. They needed a colon surgeon and the urology surgeon at the same time. And of course, scheduling that in Rhode Island is a challenge in the summer anyway.
Yeah.
So they had scheduled this surgery as soon as they could. I don't remember when the original one was scheduled. It got pushed back by the hospital for a little bit, and then it's pushing back in towards the end of summer into September. In September, he was supposed to have the surgery, and I believe it was the 15th. It was actually, Kathy, it was actually supposed to be the day that we came up and did our big banquet up at
oh, wow. Okay.
That was the day that was supposed to be. Well, that was a Thursday. On that Monday, he came down with COVID. And it was the mildest case of COVID. I mean, he's a collegiate athlete, and he still is.
Right.
He's still playing lacrosse, and he's still playing tennis, and he came down with the mildest case of COVID. He actually moved over back into our house, to be away from the kids, and into our basement that's all finished. But I mean, he was out running around with a mask on, and his, just 2 days he was just going. It was like a non-issue. However, they informed him at that time that they would not do the surgery for 7 more weeks, which went to November.
Wow.
And we could not understand that. We were, matter of fact, I talked with some high-level professionals in the medical insurance world in Rhode Island. And being a young couple with young kids and all the unknown of the future, they had decided not to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
So I discovered through some very reliable sources that the 7-week delay on the surgery was their way of making you wait because you didn't get vaccinated.
Oh, brother.
Their penalty, basically.
It was yeah. It was, you weren't vaccinated, you go 7 weeks. And I'm having this conversation with this person, and I am having a 30-year experienced doctor sitting at the table with us who said, there is absolutely zero medical or scientific logic behind that. There's no 7-week thing that makes any sense to waiting 7 weeks other than them wanting to just.
Right. And that's not something they would have put on someone having COVID who had been vaccinated. That's
Right.
not a restriction that had precedence at all.
If he'd been vaccinated, he probably would have been in the surgery in, another week or two or something like that. But they push it back 7 weeks.
Wow.
To put it into November. Again, every day with that concern and pain he would go through just in short spurts, but was just unbelievable. So they push it back to November, and Rich, you and I had a conversation one day about that, and you encouraged Kelly and I to go ask the Father, is this okay? Is this your will?
Mm-hmm.
Or are we to accept this, or are we to pack him up and go up to Boston and
Right.
make this happen or whatever?
Yeah.
And what was it? And I have to say that within a day or two, as I'm praying about this, I felt that it was his will to wait to November. As much as we didn't want to, and I'm concerned for my son and his health and his life-threatening thing and his pain and the whole family and whatnot, God was saying to me, yeah, no, this is okay. November.
Trust me with this.
Yeah, trust me with this. So we pressed on to November. The surgery comes up in November. He's waited all this time since the beginning of June to finally have the surgery. He goes into the surgery, and the colon surgeon, last minute had canceled out on coming to do the surgery. And another surgeon, young woman, not that many years out of med school, whatever, steps in, and she's doing the other part of it. And she says, she looks at the whole situation, and she says, well, this is going to take a little longer in surgery, but I think I can handle this whole thing in a less invasive way and a much better way, which will help him to heal faster and whatnot. So they did a 7-hour surgery, and this woman stepping in did an unbelievable job. And he was supposed to take 8 weeks to heal, and he was running around in 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
There was going to be these after effects, and none of those after effects really took place. And just looking back at God, God having that in place, which is how he revealed to me. He's like, no, November's okay. I got something going on in November for him that you don't know about yet. So
that's awesome.
It was pretty cool. And yeah, Rich, to your point, I mean, sharing that with him along the way, and him having that total confidence and peace, and seeing, at 29 years old, seeing God's hand on those decisions and guiding those things is, just what a blessing.
Yeah, and when you see the, you describe what happened there. God's will is, I know more than you do, and timing is always part of it, because he's got to get things at the right place. And he said, trust me, which is what you heard. Two things. One is, how did you help John and his wife Faith receive that it's okay. I know it's going to be difficult for you, but stay with it. There's some reason for this, that they had to also receive. And then describe why you understand what happened with that other doctor coming in. That's a supernatural work of God, because that's what we're trying to help people understand, is that It wasn't luck. It wasn't, well, okay, circumstance. It was just actually God said, I'm putting this together because I need her to do the surgery. So anyway, why don't you describe how you assisted your son just in them receiving it, and then how do you understand why is what happened supernatural?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it wasn't any in-depth thing. I mean, they've come to understand seeking God's will through, again, other things like the house and the conflicts and stuff. So
Yep.
when I just came to them and said, look, I really believe that this timing is okay and it's God's will, they were pretty much, especially my son, they were like in agreement.
Yep.
They were, yep, got it, okay. And they were not anxious about it. They weren't impatient.
Well, and in
about
that, if I can insert, I would assume too, they're abiding on this at the same time.
Yeah.
And so you sharing that isn't you telling them what God said, it's you sharing what God's telling you, and it's confirming what God's been telling them. So there's an immediate kind of, okay, yeah, God's telling us all the same thing. We're in a good spot here.
And not just with their personalities, but I think with any of us, when something's going on with our spouse, it's harder than it is for us. So I'm sure, and I know that it was harder on Faith. She wanted to get this thing resolved, and she wanted to fix it. And I get that. I mean, you guys both know when things go on with your spouses, we get even more, I guess, ambitious about it.
Right. Especially with young children involved too, and the whole dynamic. Yeah.
So, and John just has an amazing, peaceful way about him. And so he received that well. And I think as you say, Kathy, it was really an affirmation. It wasn't, I wasn't going to him saying, this is what God said. And it wasn't like it was contradictory to what he wanted or what he thought. So, and so, one of the things you just mentioned, though, Rich, and this, God really, about a year ago in my abiding, God really spoke to me about his timing is as much a supernatural as the supernatural thing is itself.
Yeah.
It really
is.
That's good. It's we look at, oh, this was supernatural. What happened? It wasn't natural. It was supernatural. It was his will. It was what he was at work. The timing of that is just as supernatural.
That's right. Yep.
And something really God was hitting me with last year in my abiding time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the neat thing is that because our heart desire is always, tell us everything that's going to happen. And what do we have to do? And he says, actually, mostly it's about what I'm going to do. You just get to the right place. And that, he didn't say, go get a different surgeon. He says, I'm going to provide a different surgeon, and that's going to be the right person to do this. And then, by the way, it is supernatural. So I love that God's timing itself is supernatural. That's a beautiful thing to talk about and process about. So thank you, Rick, for sharing that. We're going to continue our story next week with Rick, because he's also involved in making disciples, particularly with his C12 CEOs. That and I know because of just hearing the stories that Rick comes alongside of them. And there's a way you do that. I would like you to help explain, because that's really discipleship in essence, and our role of how do we come alongside family members and other people in the same way. So we look forward to hearing that. Thank you, Rick, for sharing that. And John's back to health, right?
Better than ever.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Love it.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah.
Full force.
So Kathy will do End Times Friday, and Rick will pick you up again next week.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks for joining us, everyone. If you have any questions, even questions for Rick as he joined us, send them in at questions@afjministry.com. We'd be happy to talk about it, and hope you found today encouraging and just a beautiful reminder how God works in and through the supernatural.
Amen.
So have a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.